The Crown has another 13 Emmy nominations, including one for director Jessica Hobbs. I'm Riley Chow with Gold Derby. Now, the episode that you submitted is actually the same one that's been submitted by both of the actors that were nominated this season, Olivia Colman and Helena Bonham Carter. So you directed a couple episodes of Broadchurch 5 years ago, directing Olivia Colman there. That was before she had achieved this international recognition. So how has she changed as an actress since then?
I would say she hasn't changed, actually. She's a true North, Olivia. She's someone who's ultimately incredibly plugged into what she does. She has a transcendent quality about her, which means that she has the ability to just directly convey what she's feeling as the character straight into the audience. She doesn't analyze it, she doesn't overthink it, she just has this kind of direct plug-in, is the way I'd describe it. And the only thing I've noticed is that she has become rightly more protective of that way of working, so that she's very open to different levels of direction and specificity. But if you know her well, the best thing to give her is to give her some freedom and she can do whatever you want, but if you take the reins off her a little bit, she's extraordinary.
So you did the Moondust episode, the third season finale. Now you're doing post-production on the fourth season. How did you get hired onto The Crown?
They had contacted my agent. I'd been in the UK, I think about 3 or 4 years by that stage. And my agent called me up. She wasn't sure. It was the third season, but it was a new show, whether that was something I wanted to do. But I confessed to her that I loved the show so much. And I knew that Olivia was going to be in it. So I was very excited. And then I met with the two of the producers, Suzanne Mackey and Andy Harries, initially. And then I went out to lunch with Peter. And we had an incredibly frank and really good discussion, actually. He said all the things you want to hear as a director, which is he wanted my voice, he wanted my take on it, he wanted it to feel original and different for each director. He didn't want the show necessarily to feel constrained by having to sit in a house style, and that really excited me. And I just really enjoyed talking to him. I found him slightly terrifying. He's extremely bright, particularly where drama is concerned, and he says what he thinks, but that ended up being a very good combination. I'm the same, so we were fine.
Yeah, when you have that directive from the showrunner to bring your own voice and not conform to a house style, how will viewers know that they're watching one of your episodes, even without seeing that, directed by Jessica Hobbs credit?
I don't know. What I would hope is that my aim when I'm directing is that I don't want people to be aware of what I've done. I want people to have an experience and to get carried away and to forget about their lives for an instant and to relate to somebody else's experience, which might open a window onto their own sense of self. That's all I try and do. I think the more you direct, the more you expose the way you look at the world. So you do reveal a lot of yourself in it, and people say that they can see, definition in my work and the way it appears to them when they can see that it's something I've done. I think possibly for a director, you're too close to your own work to see it as much. But yeah.
Your first episode was that Moondust episode, as I mentioned, which was kind of the big Philip episode this season. I'm wondering what you took from Stephen Daldry's directing of the Paterfamilias episode that was really his big episode last season.
Yeah, and really good question. We talked a lot about the moment of asking for help in that Paterfamilias episode, and how difficult it was to be able to ask for help as a child and therefore almost impossible as an adult male. And so that was the key kind of emotional core that Tobias and I wanted to refer back to, besides the fact that I'm such a huge fan of Stephen's directing. There's such joy watching what he does on screen. I always know I'm going to be surprised, and the actors are going to be surprised, and the audience is going to be surprised. So I did want to have a nod to that. I wanted to find those little moments of joy and privacy and unexpectedness in that episode. That was a particularly challenging one because you're taking you know, essentially an adventure story that we all know works out. I mean, we all know the moon landing happened and it was okay, but you have to provide attention for it at the time. You have to give it a context and feel what it was like at the time. But then to turn it into a story about the notion of faith and self-doubt, that was the kind of high wire act of it for, you know, I loved it when I read it. I just didn't quite know how to pull that off directorially. I think we really did, but that was the big challenge.
Now, I would have liked to have seen Tobias Menzies nominated. He was not, and I think he would have submitted that episode. So it sounds like he needs someone to go to bat for him. So what do you think he does that deserves particular recognition?
Tobias is probably one of the most thoughtful, intelligent, brave actors that I've worked with. He is so able to be under the skin of the character and so unafraid of being unlikable or difficult. He just has this beautiful stillness about him, and that is actually quite a rare quality. He's not trying to project out all the time. He invites you in when you watch. And I found, yeah, I just wanted to keep working with him basically as much as possible. I got to do some stuff with him this next season, which was great, but we both missed that opportunity to do a whole piece together. There was something very unique about how far he was prepared to go.
There's that climactic scene in that episode where he's talking to the three astronauts, and if they hadn't introduced themselves, or if there wasn't the occasional, you know, reference to one of their names, I wouldn't have been able to tell which one is which, because they kind of move the same way. Can you tell me about, you know, shooting them as a unit and why you didn't want to differentiate them?
Yes, I think, look, I mean, I guess I know them so well, both as characters and as those individual astronauts. I'd done so much research, they're more individual to me. But we did talk a lot about, and I watched a lot of the news footage that was available. As soon as they came down, they were put into kind of a 2-week or 3-week confinement together in like an old Airstream. They had to sit in that space, just those 3 astronauts, while they decompressed, and then they went on a tour of the world. So they had each other to mirror all the time, and that was one of the things we discussed. We also talked a lot about the fact that as astronauts, they'd done what was expected of them militarily, and they'd done what was expected of them in the terms of their job. And now everybody in the world, Philip included, wanted kind of a piece of their interior life. And they felt rightly self-protective of that. So I love that scene because he is so angry at exposing his vulnerability. He never reaches out. He never says to people. He behaves almost like a lovesick teenager at the beginning of it. He's got a crush on them. He can't quite believe that they're in the room. And so he elevates them so highly. And when they don't respond in the way he wants and needs from them, he gets very angry and embarrassed. And I thought that turn was very well by Tobias.
In the last couple of
weeks for dinner.
Yeah, that's great. In Greece is where you are. The last couple of years, we've seen so many depictions of the moon landing. You know, we had First Man, that Claire Foy was actually in. There's that hit documentary. There's a special on National Geographic. There's that Apple show For All Mankind. How do you differentiate your take so that people don't just feel like you're watching the same old, same old?
It's a really good question, and I had watched all of those films. In fact, when I watched First Man, I just sat in the cinema afterwards thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to make this different? And really the road through was, what was Philip's experience? As he's an armchair viewer, all of those films, what was extraordinary about them was that they took you into what it was to be an astronaut, what it was to be in that rocket, how it felt to be inside it. My job was to say, what was it like to want to be that person, to want to be that adventurer, to want to kind of, to sit in your living room, as we all often do, and want to have that otherworldly experience. And so that's the way through I found it. And also, the truth of it was, in 1969, unlike now, the images that we saw on television were almost unviewable. There was a little bit of black smudging. You could hear a crunch. You could hear his words. You maybe saw the flag. It was just, other than that, there was very little to see. And so I tried to use that to our advantage.
So your other episode was the season finale, which is a very Margaret-centric episode. After Ben Karen had done the other 3 Margaret episodes that we know, Feral, Matrimonium, and Margaretology. So I would have thought he would have been the obvious choice to direct that one. Helena Bonham Carter says that you're actually her favorite director, so I guess it worked out. But
Don't tell Ben.
yeah, why did you, or how did you come to get that episode instead of him like this?
When I first met Peter, there were a number of, Ben was actually already kicking off the season, so there were a number of other episodes up for grabs, and this was one of them. I particularly related to Margaret's story. I related to the age that she was, the situation that she found herself in, about being second in the family. I felt there were so many personal notes that I wanted to explore, and particularly from a female perspective, what it is to start feeling invisible, what it is to, no matter how famous you are in the world or what your position is, it is something that that I think has a particularly female voice attached to it. You start to be aware of that difference, and it was something that Helena and I bonded over. So as soon as I read it, I was desperate to do it.
So it closes the season.
No disrespect for Ben, because he's brilliant and I love him. He's great, and all those other episodes are fantastic. I just was very, happy to have that chance.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the closing image of the season, how you decided to end things there, and why.
So Peter and I had a long discussion about how to end it, and initially it was written that she actually went out into the crowds, and we could do that. On the Crown you can do that whole scale of going out through the gates and the enormous crowds and what that's like. But the conversation that we ended up having was very much about what's it like to be her. And so I wanted to rig the camera inside. We built that carriage at great cost and detailed expense, but it was brilliant because I wanted to be able to rig that camera and just be with her as she approached. I wanted to hear the noise of the crowd as they approached. And in that actual setting, there's an amazing archway that they have to pass through when they enter and when they go to the palace and they come out of the courtyard back towards the public again. And I knew that would give us an opportunity for darkness across her face, and then as the light came up as an out point. So it was very carefully choreographed, and I talked to Olivia about that too, because we were shooting it slightly slow mode, and I wanted to, I always want the actors to understand what we're doing visually so that they can play to that, really.
So you're back on the 4th season, you're doing post-production right now. I understand you did 3 episodes, but you didn't actually get to finish shooting them. So can you tell me about that? Like, you're going to release them anyway, though, I understand.
Yeah, well, okay. It became a very creative editing process, easily handled by the fact that the world was in a global pandemic, and so it wasn't for me to jump up and down and complain about the fact that I didn't get to finish shooting a series the way we wanted to. And I was actually really grateful for the creative focus of, okay, how else can we tell this story with what we've got? And I think we really succeeded. The actors were really blown away, and Peter was delighted, so it was great. But it was a scary few weeks in there, and my poor editor kept saying, but we will get to shoot the sequence. So I'm like, I don't think it's going to happen, darling. I don't think it's going to happen. And obviously it didn't. We wanted to deliver to Netflix. People are hungry to see new material, and hopefully they'll love it when they see it. Hopefully they won't notice.
Yeah, the big report is that there's an episode where the title is Avalanche, but you didn't get to film the actual avalanche, right?
Yes, Riley, that's exactly right. And that was mine. So it's the penultimate episode. But the avalanche is both real and metaphorical, and we do deal with the with what happened as a result of it. So yeah, I think it still is there. But yeah, that was exactly what we were going off to film. And initially we were in Spain, and then we switched to Scotland, and then we would shoot during the day and then take the overnight train to Scotland, look at shooting there. But in the end, everything shut down, and we realized it just wasn't going to happen.
And what's different or exciting for you about next season?
So much. Diana and Thatcher, I would say, are the two big female leads that come in, and those two characters put enormous pressure on the family from different ends. It was kind of wonderful for a cast that had fallen in love with each other and were very comfortable with each other, to introduce these two new, very rocket-fueled performances and have everyone else go, right, okay, now we have to match that. So I think it's pretty exciting.
Jess, thanks very much for taking the time to chat. We have other interviews with people from The Crown and other Emmy-nominated programs on our YouTube channel, and you can go to goldderby.com to make your own Emmy predictions.
Thanks, Riley. Nice to talk to you.